She didn't know his name, nor where he came from, much less where he was going. What she knew was enough to move her. He was sitting alone on one of the benches in the old central station, his hands on his face, his body hunched over as if he were carrying more than a backpack on his back. It was late afternoon, the tracks seemed to sigh with the heat evaporating from the concrete, and people hurried by, indifferent. But she couldn't ignore him. For some reason she couldn't explain later, she stopped. She watched for a few seconds. And then she did the unthinkable, she approached him. He was wearing a thin jacket, his hair tied back haphazardly, worn sneakers, and a look that hid his own despair. She wasn't doing well either. In fact, she was at her worst. Recently fired, bills overdue, rent past due, her cell phone at 2% battery, and in her pocket, the only $10 she had left. That was everything. Literally. Enough for a sandwich and a coffee, or to try to catch a bus to the neighborhood where she could sleep for a night at a friend's house. But she saw something in him that she recognized. Not exactly suffering, but silence. The kind of silence that screams louder than any cry. And when he looked at her for the first time, he didn't need to say anything. She just held out her hand, without hesitation, with the crumpled bill folded between her fingers. Here. It's not much, but maybe it will help. He took a moment to understand. He looked at the bill, then at her. I can't accept this, he said, his voice weak. Yes, you can, she replied. Today it's me. Tomorrow you'll help someone else. And here I pause. Because if you've reached this point in the story and want to know what happens to these two, what comes of this seemingly small but meaningful gesture, then subscribe to the channel now. Turn on the bell, because what you're about to discover will turn your beliefs about destiny, encounters, and second chances upside down. Back to the story. He accepted. Not because of the amount, but because of the gesture. And there, for a few minutes, they talked. Nothing deep. Just are you okay, and I've been better. She didn't ask for details. She didn't pry. She just said she hoped things would get better. He thanked her. He promised that, somehow, he would repay her. She smiled. You don't have to, she replied, before saying goodbye. And she disappeared among the people on the platform like a leaf carried by the wind. What she didn't know, and would only discover much later, was that this man was not just another lost traveler. His name was Richard Carter. And what the world knew about him fit on magazine covers and economic headlines. He was the owner of companies in the renewable energy sector, a silent investor in dozens of social projects, and known for never showing up. His fortune was estimated at tens of millions, but his public image was almost non-existent. He liked to observe, study, and act anonymously. And that afternoon, he was doing just that, testing the world around him. Richard was there for a specific reason. He was reflecting on the future of a project that involved financing small actions with a human impact in invisible communities. But after 3 disappointing meetings with consultants who only talked about numbers and image return, he had decided to take to the streets alone. No suit, no security guards, no plans. He wanted to see with his own eyes how people reacted in the absence of any status. And there, on that dirty platform, he received one of the most honest gestures he had ever witnessed. A woman, clearly in difficulty, sharing her last money with someone who hadn't even asked. It broke him down. It touched something that financial statements had never touched. He kept the bill. And her face too. Even without knowing her name, he would carry that image with him for weeks. And he decided, he would find her. But it wasn't easy. She had disappeared from the radar. No active social media, no fixed contacts, living from favor to favor. Richard tried everything discreetly. He hired a private investigator, the same one he used to make anonymous donations. And after a few days, he got his first lead, a young woman who went to a public library every day, used the computer for exactly 40 minutes, and left with a folder of resumes under her arm. It was her. Richard went there. But he didn't approach her. Not yet. He watched. He saw how she treated the attendant, how she thanked him, how she helped an elderly woman print a document that wasn't working. He saw the same look of empathy that had touched him at the station. And he understood that it wasn't an isolated gesture. It was part of who she was. The following week, he returned. And this time, he left an envelope with her name on it, with a note, "You don't know my name. But one day, you gave me your last money. Now it's my turn to do something for you." Inside was a personal letter, with no money, no ostentation. Just words. He identified himself, told her the truth, thanked her, and said that if she wanted, she could find him, not as a businessman, but as someone who wanted to talk. She received the envelope with surprise. She read it and reread it. She thought about tearing it up, thinking it was a prank. But there was something in the words that touched her deeply. At the end of the letter was the address of a coffee shop and a time, Friday, 4 p.m. A meeting. No strings attached. She went. And when she arrived, she saw the same man, this time smiling, with a coffee in his hands and eyes that sparkled like someone who had found what they were looking for. And here, we pause. Because part 2 of this story is where everything changes. Where she discovers who he really is. Where what seemed like just a gesture turns into a twist that even the most romantic movies would dare to write. If you want to know what happened when she sat down at that table, what Richard revealed, and how her life was turned upside down, you already know what to do. Subscribe to the channel now, turn on the bell, because the rest is coming. And what's behind that $10 bill is worth much more than you can imagine. She arrived a few minutes early. The coffee shop was small, tucked between a neighborhood bookstore and a beauty salon. The kind of place where time seems to slow down, and conversations are kept within the exposed brick walls. As soon as she walked in, she looked around. And there he was. The same man from the station. But different. Not in appearance, he was still wearing simple clothes, ordinary sneakers, and unshaven. But there was something new in his eyes, tranquility. He stood up when he saw her, holding his coffee with one hand and pointing to the chair across from him. "I thought you might not come," he said with a half-smile. She sat down slowly, still suspicious. "I almost didn't come. I thought it was a joke. Or a scam." He understood. "I would have thought the same. But I'm glad you came." The first few minutes were awkward. He didn't force conversation. He just talked about the day, the weather, asked how she was feeling. And little by little, she relaxed. She told him she was still unemployed, that she had gotten a few odd jobs here and there, that she was trying to keep her chin up. She spoke sincerely, without playing the victim, but without hiding the harshness of the moment. He listened attentively. Without interrupting. Without lecturing. He just listened. When the conversation paused naturally, he leaned forward slightly and said, "There's something I need to tell you. Something that might change what you think of me. But I want you to hear me out, and then decide what to do with it." She nodded, serious. "My name is Richard Carter. And I'm not who I seem to be." She raised her eyebrow but said nothing. He continued. "That day at the station, I wasn't starving. I wasn't lost either. I was there because I wanted to understand how far human generosity goes when there is no reason to be generous. I'm a businessman. I have businesses in various places. Projects, investments, a life that seems very different from yours. But that day, I felt smaller than I ever have in a boardroom. And your gesture changed me." She didn't answer right away. She stared at him, trying to fit those words into the simple man in front of her. Trying to understand what was real and what was a game. "Are you rich?" she finally asked. He sighed. "I am. But more than that. I'm someone who was lost. And you found me, without even knowing it." Silence fell. She leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. "So that was a test." He shook his head. "Not exactly. It was a social experiment, perhaps. But I wasn't testing you. I was trying to find some hope in people again." She was silent for a few more seconds. Then, in a calm tone, she asked, "Why did you call me here, then?" He smiled, this time with his eyes. "Because since that day, I wanted to see you again. I wanted to understand who the person was who gave me everything she had, without expecting anything in return. And after watching you for a few days, I realized it wasn't luck. That's who you are. And I wanted to know if I could continue getting to know you. For real. No masks. No games." She laughed, without irony. "You sound like a movie," she said. He laughed along with her. "Yeah, I know. And I understand if you want to leave right now." But she didn't. She stayed. They ordered another coffee. And they talked. About childhood, about music, about simple things. He told her that he lost his parents at an early age, that he was raised by his aunt and uncle and started working when he was 12. She told him about her dreams of working in education, about how she dropped out of college to help out at home. They discovered more similarities than they imagined. And little by little, the image of the millionaire businessman gave way to the ordinary man. The real Richard. In the days that followed, they continued to meet. always in the same simple places. He never surrounded her with luxury, never offered her money, never tried to impress her. He just wanted to be there. With her. And she, after spending so much time surrounded by absence, began to feel that there was something different about this man. It wasn't the money. It was the attention. It was the way he looked at her, the way he listened. It was as if the world slowed down when they were together. And she, without realizing it, began to look forward to their meetings. To look at the clock. To smile to herself in the middle of the day. But of course, nothing is that simple. The first complications came from outside. One day, while walking downtown, a woman recognized him. Whispers began. Cell phones were raised. Photos were taken. And within hours, his name was on gossip websites. Mysterious billionaire seen with unknown brunette. She saw the article and felt a punch in the chest. Not because of the comments, but because of the way they treated her, as if she were invisible, as if she were only there out of interest. He tried to downplay it. He said the media was cruel, that it would blow over quickly. But she knew. That was just the beginning. And then came the second blow, a message on her cell phone from an unknown number. Be careful who you get involved with. Not every millionaire is a prince. Some collect stories like yours. She showed it to him. He was silent. Then he said, I'm not that kind of man. But I understand if you want to stop here. And that's when she realized that no matter how confused she was, no matter how afraid she felt, there was something stronger at stake. She was in love. Not with the rich man. But with the man she met before she knew anything. She didn't give up. They stayed together. Even with the stares, the comments, the doubts. She kept her life simple. He never tried to change her. But one day, he came up with a different proposal. I want to invest in you. Not as charity. But as a partner. You told me you dream of starting an educational project. Let's do it together. She hesitated. She didn't want to seem dependent. But she understood, this was more than love. It was trust. She accepted. They created a community space. An educational center in a poor neighborhood. Free courses, workshops, lectures. He paid for the structure. She coordinated everything. And it was there, among books and smiles, that their story took root. Because where there had once been only an impulsive gesture, there was now a choice. And where there had been two strangers at a station, there were now two people who had chosen to walk side by side. But the biggest gesture was yet to come. Because what Richard had planned, was something she didn't expect. And that's exactly what you'll see in part 3. If you want to know what he did to surprise the love of his life, how this story ends, or rather, begins again, then subscribe now. Activate the bell. Because the last part is coming with everything. And it will show you that destiny is written in the details. If you've been following this story so far and haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now is the time. Because what will happen in this final part is not just the end of a story, it's the beginning of something that could change the way you see people, encounters, and chance. Activate the bell, like the video, and get ready, because Richard and Helena are about to prove that when the gesture is genuine, destiny rewards you. It had been almost a year since that day at the station. Helena's life had changed completely. Not because of the gifts, not because of the money, not because of the cameras that sometimes appeared in the distance. But because she was, for the first time, living a life with purpose. The educational center they created together served more than 100 young people a week. Helena coordinated everything with passion, knew each student by name, and was seen as someone who truly believed in people. Richard, for his part, remained discreet. He continued his travels, his meetings, his billion-dollar projects, but now with a difference. At every investment meeting, with every new deal, he thought about how it could be reflected in the real world. In people. In those who would never have access to a suite or a conference room. Because she taught him to see the invisible. Despite their busy schedules, the two kept up regular meetings. Coffee, evening walks, quiet nights downtown, away from the spotlight. They were still simple. They were still sincere. But something was beginning to grow between them that was not spoken aloud. It was in their eyes. In their silences. In their little touches. They knew. Helena, however, carried a doubt that she shared with no one. The fear of not belonging to his world. As much as he never made a fuss about money, as much as he tried to keep everything on the same level, she knew who he was out there. And she feared that one day, that world would pull him away. Richard, attentive as always, noticed. And so he began to prepare something. In silence. Carefully. With time. It was on a Friday afternoon that he invited her to leave work early. "I want to show you something," he said. She, without imagining what was coming, just grabbed her purse, left her papers in order, and left with him. They walked a few blocks, took a taxi, and made small talk. Until they arrived at an old but well-maintained building with a facade full of details. "Do you recognize it?" he asked. She shook her head. "This is where my parents met. Today, it's an art gallery. But there's something inside I'd like you to see." They went up together. The place was empty. There was only one employee at the reception desk, who smiled and let them pass. In the main hall, a different exhibition awaited them. On the walls were large pictures, each with a meaningful image. But they were not landscape paintings or formal portraits. They were pictures with photos. They were photos of Helena. At the educational center, with the students, handing out books, hugging families, organizing activities. She stopped, not knowing what to say. Each image had a short handwritten phrase, signed by Richard. "She transforms. She inspires. She teaches. She changes the world without making a sound." What is this?" she asked, moved. He smiled. "It's my way of showing the world who you are. And more than that, showing you yourself. Because I know that sometimes you feel small. That you still doubt whether you deserve to be with me. And I needed you to see how much bigger you are than you think." She cried. Without shame, without trying to hide it. Because it wasn't ostentatious. It was recognition. It was love translated into care. And he wasn't finished. In the center of the gallery, on a white pedestal, there was a small wooden box. Richard picked it up, knelt down right there, and opened it. Inside was a simple, elegant ring with a light blue stone in the center. "You gave me your last money without knowing who I was. Now I know exactly who you are. And even so, I still want you to be everything to me. Will you marry me?" The silence in the room was filled with the sound of her breathing as she tried to catch her breath between tears. She said yes. She didn't shout. She just whispered, moved, like someone who understands that certain moments don't need an audience. The receptionist, who had been warned in advance, discreetly recorded everything. And in that moment, Richard and Helena sealed a story that had begun with a simple $10 bill and was now taking shape as a new future. After that, life went on. But in a different way. They were married in an intimate ceremony in the countryside, surrounded by former students from the center, close friends, and a few guests. No extreme luxury, no press. Just people who knew the value of a sincere journey. Helena continued to coordinate the center, which has now grown and opened branches. Richard financed it, but never put himself forward. He said it was her project. And indeed it was. But what really drove them went beyond that. They began to tell their story. In schools. At meetings. At TED Talks. In social campaigns. Never as a fairy tale. But as an example that a gesture, no matter how small, can change the entire destiny of two lives. And many others. And perhaps the most symbolic moment happened 2 years later, at the same station where it all began. They were filming a campaign for the center, and Helena asked them to record her speaking there, sitting on the same bench. In front of the camera, she said, "I didn't give him $10. I gave him confidence. And that's what changed everything." He wasn't just a man at that station. He was someone who needed to believe that there were still people who act without expecting anything in return. And today, looking back, I see that maybe the person who needed to believe the most that day, was me. The campaign went viral. But more important than the views were the letters that started arriving. People saying they had changed their attitude. That they were helping more. That they were inspired. That they understood the value of a small gesture. And if you've made it this far, understand this story isn't just about them. It's about me, you, anyone who has ever passed someone by without looking them in the eye. It's about the chance to stop, to reach out, to give even when you have little. Because sometimes, a little, is everything. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. This story ends here, but the channel continues to tell real, inspiring stories, with emotion and truth. So turn on the bell, share with someone who needs to believe again, and prepare your heart. Because in the next videos, love and destiny continue to cross unlikely paths. And who knows, maybe the next story will be yours.